So this is the brand new Razer Blade 18. It's rocking an RTX 4070. And when I got this thing into the studio, I was expecting this thing to be around the same size as the 17-inch model, but it's bigger. It's quite a bit bigger. And obviously it's deeper due to the 16:10 aspect ratio, but it's still smaller than a lot of 17-inch clunkers that I've reviewed in the past. Like, trust me, I've reviewed some ugly, thick 17-inch gaming notebooks. And to this day, Razer still makes some of the best looking gaming laptops on the market. Like, don't get me wrong, they're not perfect. They've had some of their own issues, but in terms of the design, they are definitely at the top. And I feel like this 18-inch notebook fits right in there. Now, this is heavier than the previous model. The previous one is around 6.06 pounds. This one is 7.06 pounds. And then you include the 280 watt GAN charger. Thank you for giving us GAN chargers. I've seen some power bricks that are the size of my head, and they just need not to exist anymore. But this is like a familiar product. Like, if you've used a Blade 17, picture an 18-inch version with the exact same ports. Like, even on the left-hand side, the layout is identical. You have your power connector, RJ45, which is 2.5 gigabits. You have two USB-A 3.2 Gen 2 ports. You have a Type-C port, an audio jack. And then on the right-hand side, you have your Noble Lock, HDMI, which is 2.1, USB-A 3.2 Gen 2, another Type-C port, and then a full-size SD card slot, which supports speeds of UHS 2. So right here, I have the 17-inch model, and when you open it up, the hinges on both of these guys are super stiff. There's very little wobble on the laptop. The display goes just as back as the previous version, but the biggest difference is the size of this touchpad. It is absolutely massive. It just takes up a big portion of the deck of the keyboard. It feels like the previous one. It's still glass. It's a good touchpad. The RGB looks just as good as the previous 17-inch model. You have the big speakers on the left and right-hand side. There's no finger scanner. You have to use facial recognition because Razer includes all the sensors that support Windows Hello. Now, the thing that I don't like is the amount of fingerprints these laptops can get. As you can see, there's about 90 pounds of grease on both laptops already, so you're gonna have to be wiping this down every so often. The speakers, though, are incredible. They sound amazing, like the best I've heard on a Windows laptop. Not as good as the MacBook Pro 16, but very close. The one area the MacBook Pro 16 does excel in is the ability to have a better low end and mid-range, whereas the Razer Blade tends to focus on the highs and leaves out the lows. But I really love this 18-inch display. Maybe because I'm getting older and I always want a big screen. Like, just having a screen this big changes the way the laptop feels. Like, it doesn't feel like I need a massive monitor to use this. Like, I'm totally okay using this on an 18-inch display. Now, obviously, I would like to game on a bigger 27-inch display if I'm playing for longer periods of time, but just having this on a laptop makes a big difference if you're working with 2 documents, or if you're gaming, or just using this thing for, I don't know, 8 or 9 hours a day. Now, this is a 16:10 aspect ratio. It does have 240 hertz. The color accuracy is fantastic. The color gamut is really good, and this display does get really bright. Unfortunately, there's no mini LED option for this. You have to buy the 16-inch notebook. Now, I did have one problem with this display. Like, this does have all the latest drivers. I don't know if you guys can see this, but it flashes a lot. There's a lot of stuttering going on. And it doesn't matter which refresh rate I have the display set to, you see a lot of stuttering. Now, this could be a couple of reasons. Maybe the monitor and the GPU is out of sync, so it's causing this weird stuttering effect. Or maybe NVIDIA just needs to update the drivers to something a bit more recent to have this issue not happen again. Sorry to interrupt, but I think I found a solution for now. In the BIOS, you have the option to disable NVIDIA's display switching technology. I turned it off, which means the laptop is running entirely on the discrete GPU and not using the integrated GPU at all. This fixed the issue, but that means I'm not going to get good battery life anymore. So I'm chalking this down to a software issue, or something's wrong with the integrated GPU from Intel in this specific unit. Now, Razer Synapse comes pre-installed, and you do have the option to leave it on balanced or silent. If you want the maximum performance out of this thing, you're gonna wanna leave it on custom and change it to boost and high. Leaving it on balanced is not a good idea. It really kills the performance on this laptop. Like, Razer's really aiming this to have a quiet profile, because when you leave it on balanced or silent, the fans are like below 50, sometimes even below 40 decibels, depending on which profile you have it on. But custom is the only way to get the right performance out of this thing. So if you have this plugged in and you wanna like push this to its full potential, you gotta leave it on custom mode or you just won't get the same performance. But performance on this is incredible. Like, you're taking an i9-13950HX unlocked CPU from Intel and you're pairing it with an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4070 that has a max TGP of 140 watts. Depending on what you're doing, you're gonna see a nice bump from last year's Blade 17. If you're using applications like Adobe Premiere Pro, Photoshop, and After Effects, which tend to lean towards being a bit more CPU intensive, you will see a big difference compared to last year's Blade 17. If you're talking about stuff that's more GPU intensive, it really trades blows with the RTX 3080 Ti from last year's model. NVIDIA says this is on par with an RTX 3080 in a laptop. I think it also is on par with some RTX 3080 Ti. So depending on the laptop, this might beat it out, but it definitely trades blows, especially if you're gaming. Like, if you're gaming at 1080p, then I found the Blade 17 was usually a bit faster with the 3080 Ti, but as soon as you bumped up the settings to QHD, then the 4070 was really putting up fierce competition. Sometimes it was faster, other times the 3080 Ti was faster. But the kicker is you're getting a GPU that runs at 140 watts, but performing very well compared to a 175 watt TGP on that 3080 Ti. But if the game you're playing supports DLSS 3, turn it on. It made a big difference in CYBERPUNK. So not only am I not losing visual fidelity, I'm actually gaining it because of ray tracing, but I'm also getting more performance out of the GPU. And I think that's like the biggest area that these 40 series really excel on. Plus, I also noticed that they're a lot more efficient than the 30 series. Like, I'm testing another laptop with an RTX 4070 and its max TGP is only 105 watts. And the performance difference between these GPUs is almost negligible. Like, there's just not that big of a difference. The only thing that's kind of swaying them is the CPU, because the other laptops in a thinner chassis, it's not using an HX processor. But the GPU performance between 140 watts and 105 watts, not that big of a difference compared to previous models. And that's a good thing, because it means when you look at a new laptop this year and you're looking at thinner form factors and they have an RTX 4070 inside, you know right away that the performance on those guys is gonna be not equally as good as the 140 watt version, but almost as good. And that's a big deal for the laptop industry. Now, thermals have been great. Like, I ran Prime 95, which is stability test, which is an unrealistic scenario. Like, you're not pushing this laptop ever for this long, and it handled it. Keyboard deck got a little bit warm, never hot to the touch. Temps of the CPU stayed around 83 degrees Celsius. Clock speeds were very respectable. Internally, you get a nice big vapor chamber cooler to help keep the CPU and GPU cool. You also have a third fan on the bottom here to help dissipate heat and keep the battery cooler. And you have two slots for your drive. One is populated with a fast NVMe SSD, and the other one is available if you need the extra storage. Swappable Wi-Fi card, upgradable RAM up to 64 gigabytes. Right now I have 32, and a 91 watt-hour battery. The battery life on this hasn't been great. Like, I'm only pushing 3 hours of use before needing to charge. This is literally a desktop replacement. Honestly, for me, this is the best looking 18-inch notebook I've seen announced this year. Is it the fastest one on the market? Probably not. Like, there's other companies offering you more value for the money, but if you want the best looking gaming laptop, this is probably the one to get. I also love the fact that if you're buying a thin gaming laptop this year, let's say you buy a 4070, for example, the performance difference between a more beefed up 4070 is not as drastic as it used to be. And that's kind of exciting for users out there who want a gaming laptop, but want something that they can travel with. If you have any questions, let me know. If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.